Welcome to Blackbird Writers Presents Author Interviews. Hi, I'm Tracy Phillips, and this is Amy Pease with me today. She is an alumnus of the University of Wisconsin and the Madison Writers Studio. She works as a nurse practitioner where she is a nationally recognized HIV specialist. And she lives in Wisconsin with her husband and 2 children. And that to me is just amazing. She's raising children, writing books, and working full-time. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to finally meet you and talk to you about your book, The Northwoods. It was intense and very, very good. That's my favorite kind of book.
Thank you. Thank you. Me too.
Yeah. Um, so your day job is in nursing. And like I said, I'm always amazed how authors can manage a full-time job and do the work, get the book written. It takes so long to develop a book. And then you're also raising a family. Tell viewers a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, I guess I've been wanting to be a writer since I was a little kid. I won an essay contest in second grade, and I don't remember what the essay was about, but I remember my teacher telling me that I was a good writer. And I must have really internalized that because I just always sort of thought of myself as a writer, even though I didn't really actually write anything. But over the course of my early years, anything that I could learn about writing, I would just devour. That's books or like little workshops that I would go to here and there, um, YouTube channels, all that sort of thing. I just absolutely love the craft of writing. And then maybe like, gosh, maybe 7 years ago now, I decided that it was now or never to actually write something. Um, and so I just, started by setting myself a little imagination exercise one day and just to imagine a scene, any scene that came to my mind. And it was actually the opening scene of Northwoods. So then I spent the next probably 4 years working that writing process into my life, which, as you said, involves a full-time job. At the time, my older daughter was like a toddler, my younger daughter was just born, and my husband works full-time too. And so it was a little bit here, a little bit there. But I just kept plugging away at it because it meant a lot to me. And I felt like the story that had popped into my mind kept on gaining momentum as I went, through the course of all the really awful writing that comes first in a manuscript. Despite all the terrible stuff that landed on the page at first. I felt like in general, it was becoming a story that I was willing to put the work into, even if I didn't really have time to do it.
Yeah. But that's, I think, what motivates most of us writers too. We get so invested in our characters and what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
And
characters are key.
yeah. And your book opens with the character Eli North. He's your main character, and he's wading into the lake with a travel mug full of whiskey. Um, who is Eli? Tell us a little bit about his backstory.
Yeah. Um, Eli came into my mind fully formed. And when I say that I imagined the opening scene of the book, it was truly an image of a melancholy man floating in a lake on a summer night when music starts coming over the water. And I, just when I got home that night, because I thought about that on the drive home from work, I just started writing it. And then the first 2 or 3 chapters came out right away. And that became a crime fiction novel. I didn't intend on writing crime fiction. It's not something that I had, focused on in terms of my own recreational reading. But he just was a character that came to me so vividly, and I knew him so well right from the beginning, and I knew the state of mind he was in, and I thought there's an arc to this character that would be really interesting to explore.
Yeah. Did you have any like specific inspiration for him? Is there anyone who maybe inspired this character?
No, not really. The closest I could say is that there's a book I read. I would say it was a memoir, and it was called Seriously Not Okay. And
Oh,
I need to look up the author because I should make mention of it. And um, it was his story about working. He was sort of like civilian within the military, like not a UN observer, but something like that during Kosovo and Rwanda, and he had PTSD. And the way that he described it in his book was very fascinating. And I've had many patients with PTSD, but when I think back to like anything that might have inspired Eli, it was probably that author in his memoir.
oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you can add it in the chats. I'm just going to suggest this now once we
Yeah,
post the video.
I will do that. Yes.
Yeah, that'd be
That has
great.
been on my to-do list of things to look up is just double check that author's name.
Yeah, great. And so clearly, right off the bat, we know that Eli has trouble with alcohol. And so alcohol and addiction are both difficult themes which you manage with great finesse in this book. I think many people can relate to a character who's addicted because whether it's alcohol or drugs, the story is kind of the same for us, anyone connected to that reality or sadly touched by it. Um, and so not only do you portray Eli's struggle to remain sober, but you dive into his mother's feelings of helplessness as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, is it a subject that's close to home for you?
It's not, thankfully, but I have a glimpse of it very often with my patients, and I
Yeah.
always have. So I'm in the really lucky position not to have a personal connection with substance abuse or, close family connection with it. But yet it's something that I help people with or try to help people with on almost a daily basis. I mean, mental health and substance abuse for sure.
Yeah. And then on the other side of that, did you ever worry that the trope of an alcoholic cop was like an overused theme?
Yes, I had worried about it and I still do worry about it because when I sum up the book, it sounds really tropey, really, really tropey. And I'm someone who loves romance novels, genre romance. And genre romance is all about tropes.
Hmm.
And so at the end of the day, I decided, well, I like tropes. And I think a lot of readers do too. And you can do a trope justice or you cannot do it justice. And just being tropey in general, I don't think necessarily makes for a bad or unoriginal or sort of lazy, bland story.
Right.
So it was a jumping off point that I thought a lot about, but then decided that I liked it enough and hoped other people would too.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I thought you did a really good job without it being too, tropey.
Yeah, well, and the thing that I think I could bring to it is that experience that I have with um the healthcare side of things, especially in this case, mental illness and addiction, because I know how I know where the boundary is between a trope and a stereotype. And stereotypes do not make for good fiction. They just don't. They're kind
Right.
of uninspiring.
Yeah.
So you start with the trope, but you got to make it more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. So when Eli goes to the house across the lake, he finds something that totally rattles his soul. It's the body of a teenage boy who looks momentarily like his own son, Andy. So set up the crime for your viewers.
Mhm. Well, like I said, this was all the first, that's in the, he finds the boy at the end of the second chapter. Um, and the first two or three chapters were completely written by the seat of my pants. So I just wrote what came through my consciousness, and there was a boy. Um, and then I had like shortly thereafter the idea for the finale of the book, and I had to come up with what the story was in between. Um, so I don't even think it was a premeditated idea to have that boy be the character. It just presented itself, and then I had to create a story around it. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it's very helpful. I'm not very helpful in explaining how that came into play, other than my brain just came up with it.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting because all writers have a different process, and I
Mhm.
think some of us pants and just listen to the ether, get into
Yeah.
our zen.
Yeah, and I do a very messy combination of plotting and pantsing, which I don't recommend. And I'm an aspiring plotter, um, which I'm working on book 2 in the Northwoods series right now. And I put a lot of work in the front end on coming up with a synopsis first. And I am not 100% convinced that that's the best way either. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. I think always it's a combination for most people. That's been my experience.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And so Sheriff Marge North is Eli's mom, and she's the only reason that he's able to keep his job. And she knows what he's going through, and she sort of had to, she's underfunded and understaffed, and she needed somebody else there to work with the team. Let's talk about her a little bit.
Yeah. Marge comes on the scene pretty early too, and it was another one of those things where she just came into my brain. Like I'm watching the scene play out after Eli finds the boy and Sheriff Marge comes to join him at the scene. And um she is doing her level best to do the right thing always, and she is not given much to work with. And she's faced an uphill battle always with her career, partly because she's a female sheriff. And now her son, her boy, her only son, who up until, his deployment to Afghanistan and what he went through there, up until then was just about as good of a person and a son as you could ever ask for. And now she's seeing him really falling apart and she doesn't know quite what to do. Um, and I think that to me, that seemed, I wanted to make that really realistic, because most of us don't know what to do if someone we care about is struggling. Most of us aren't specialists in addiction or mental health and don't quite know whether it's enough to just, you know, love someone a little bit more or support them a little bit more. So she's trying really hard and not necessarily succeeding.
Yeah. So let's talk about the crime in the town a little bit more, um, because there was a lot of people that and could have been involved in this boy's death, and also then there's a missing girl.
Hmm. Yeah. So there's more going on than meets the eye initially. So what starts out as an investigation into the death of this boy quickly becomes something much more far-reaching.
Right.
Um, and I love mysteries that involve conspiracy and like organized crime and that sort of thing. I'm much more into that sort of thing than the like serial killer, true crime, crazy person type um neck of the woods. So I had an idea to make it a conspiracy that involved something that I know a lot about, which is the healthcare industry and the pharmaceutical industry. Because well, especially when I was writing this, that was shortly before the whole Purdue Pharma OxyContin thing came out. Um, I feel like I have insight into that whole crazy world that most people don't. In fact, I was showing my husband the idea. This is in like fairly early stages of writing Northwoods. But I was talking about like shady pharmaceutical companies and the lengths they would go. And he was like, oh, that seems really far-fetched. And then fast forward really just a few months and the whole OxyContin, Purdue Pharma, Sackler family thing came to light. And I was just like, see, I told you. So I just thought that that was great fodder for some crime fiction.
Absolutely. When you get those big corporations involved. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, and I really liked how it sort of twisted around and you didn't really know who was involved with that. And um good job. I
Well, thank
won't give
you.
away anything away.
It was very, I really enjoy complex mysteries, but they are hard to write. I
Uh-huh.
just about wrote myself into a corner. In fact, um, the book as the finished product is very, very similar to what I like even queried my agent with. Okay, so like not a lot was changed at all in the editing process. Um, and I think it was in the copy editing stage where the copy editor pointed out a discrepancy. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how, if I can fix this. I almost ended up writing myself into a plot corner and I managed to get out of it, which is one of the motivations I have for becoming a little bit more of a plotter. When you want, because I really like, and this book is like this, where there's different character theme, there's different character arcs that weave together and gradually slam into each other to create a revelation. And I find books like that to be really fun.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do. It's really hard to do.
Yeah. Especially, I mean, it's easier if you can stay within your own wheelhouse, like you said, like
Yes.
you're involved in the medical field, and so you can pull in your knowledge um of that industry. So
Yeah, and I know nothing about law enforcement. And if it wasn't for this Facebook group that I belong to called Cops and Writers, I don't and maybe readers will realize that, especially for a police procedural, because that's what this technically is a police procedural, that there's like very loosey-goosey police proceduring going on. It was just like, is this at all plausible? Yes. Okay, good. We're gonna include this.
yeah, no, and it is, and it seems that way too because of Eli's addiction issues.
Mhm.
And then you're thinking, whoa, he shouldn't be doing that, and
No.
then, but yeah, but then it makes sense under with the terms of his addiction, and then his mom kind of letting him get away with things too, because knowing that he's struggling.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it all worked out to me.
Well, one of the things that I I know that for some folks there's a very hard and fast line when it comes to substance abuse. In that, I've had people say, well, I would never accept, a police officer to be drinking on the job. Well, the truth of the matter is there are a lot of functioning substance abusers, a lot.
Yep.
You know, could the person flying your airplane be drunk? Yes, definitely. And
That's
that's
a scary
just,
thought.
yeah, it is a scary thought, but I guarantee you that that happens. Things like that happen.
Yeah.
And my intent was always to make this as realistic as possible. And fortunately, I have like a window into what those folks are going through that let me know how far to stretch credibility. And unfortunately, credibility stretches very far when it
Yeah.
comes to what people are forced to do and what they choose to do when they're under the influence.
Right. Yeah. And so, yeah, like I said, well done. I have personal experience with addiction too, and I thought it was very realistic, and it
Yeah.
just touched me in ways I didn't expect.
Yeah.
So,
I worried a little bit. I mean, I guess you would say a trigger warning, just real vague at the beginning of the book and with a like a you can check out my website for more details type thing because um I know that when people talk about content And I'm surprised at how controversial trigger warnings are, because some people get really upset at the idea of a trigger warning and they're like, well, I'm a grown up. If I don't like the content, I can just put it down. But I think content and triggers are two different things, and for me, and I don't think this is spoiling anything, but there's a very graphic description of a panic attack,
Mhm.
probably about a quarter of the way through the book. And that particularly felt, and I don't suffer from panic attacks, but I know many people who do. And I just I didn't want anyone to have a horrible experience just because they picked up my book.
Right. Yeah.
But that's the healthcare provider in me, I think.
That could be.
Yeah.
Um, so you clearly have plans to continue the series.
Yeah.
Um, can you give us a hint at what's coming?
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm allowed to. So no one has told me I can't. Um, so I have a publishing contract for books 2 and 3 in the series. Um, book 2, and it's going to be starring Eli still with
Yeah.
Marge. Although in book 2, the FBI agent from book 1, Alyssa Mason, will be back in
Oh,
Shaky.
good.
So the first book, the point of view chapters were Eli and Marge alternating. And this time I think it's going to be Eli and Alyssa alternating, because she's got a lot of story to tell too. And I really would like to explore just the dynamic between her and Eli.
Yeah,
Because, they're a lot alike in a lot of ways, for better or for worse.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I think the second book is going to touch on, of all the exciting, sexy things, it's going to touch on Medicare fraud, which is more exciting than it sounds, I promise.
Okay.
Yeah, but there's going to be some Medicare fraud, um, and more dead bodies and missing people.
Well, great. Well, I look
Yeah,
forward to it.
yeah, yeah. That's what we sign up for crime fiction for, right? Dead bodies and missing
Exactly.
people.
Exactly. Yes. Um, and is there anything that I've forgotten to ask that you want to discuss about it?
Gosh, I don't know. I'm so used to just answering whatever question. I've learned about myself that I'll answer basically any question that anybody asks. So sometimes I've been to author events where people start asking all sorts of questions and I just let it out.
Yeah.
So
Well, and I hear you're going to be at BoucherCon.
yeah,
So, viewers and other authors, you can meet Amy at BoucherCon
yeah.
and this year at Nashville. And I look forward to meeting you in person there too.
Yeah. Well, I will be, let's see, I've got a few things lined up. I will be in Green Bay in June for an event, and then Madison Public Libraries has an event called the Book Club Cafe that I will be the featured author at the end of June for that too. So yeah, I have been having to barter babysitting responsibilities with my husband with all of this. He's just like, I think I have a lot of idiosyncratic credit to build back up again after the past 6 months of him kind of picking up the slack with watching our kids.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but what can you do? It's my side hustle that, the idea hopefully is that it'll become my first job someday. So,
Right.
which is the only way I'm able to work on the second book, is that um, I'm going to be, dropping my hours back at work slightly so
Yeah.
that I can get a couple hours, hopefully a day or most days of the week to write. Because otherwise, I don't know when I possibly would.
Right. Well, where can your readers find your book and or where can they reach out to chat with you?
Yeah. Well, it's available wherever books are sold. So everywhere from, your local bookstore to Barnes and Noble, Amazon, um, all of those sorts of places. My website is amypeaswrites.com, and you can contact me there. I'm also on Instagram, sometimes Facebook, not as often on Facebook, but Instagram is where I try to spend a little bit of time. It's easier said than done when I'm trying to fit everything else in, but I think that's the case for a lot of people, a lot of writers too. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I did see your book at Mystery to Me in Madison last night.
Oh,
So I
yes.
know that readers can pick it up there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
yeah.
thank you so much for chatting with me today and joining us with Blackbird Writers. And thanks for everything.
Yeah. Well, I hope that we can get together soon in person.
Yes, if not before BoucherCon.
Yes. Yep. Yep. Sounds good.
All right. Thanks so
All
much,
right.
Amy.
Thank you.